Hey everyone, Zach here, and welcome to the 61st lesson of this RTS tutorial series. In this video, we'll be doing our produced resources, which are resources that you cannot harvest from the map, but have to make yourself once you have met certain prerequisites. In addition to this, I'll also be doing things slightly differently in this video. Due to some feedback in the comments, I've decided that I'll stay what step we're on. And a step in this case will cover a large swath of the video, and there'll be a link in the description to the timestamp for that step. That way you can easily navigate these videos. I am contemplating adding this into the remastered series that I talked about earlier on. Alright, all of that said, open up your project, or fire up your editor first. Open your project, and let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the editor. And as I mentioned in the intro card, we'll be doing things slightly differently. In these videos going forward, I'll be listing the steps in the description below with timestamps to each one. So in today's video, I have planned for approximately 6 steps. And you'll find the timestamps, as I mentioned, in the description. Also, make sure to download the new icon if you don't have your own icons. So that said, step 1. Adding the resource variable and setting our max for it. To do so, we're going to go to our blueprints. We're going to open up our player and then go into our player controller. Let's close out what we don't need. We do need the event graph. We will need the event graph. All right, and if we look at our if we look at our variable list here, we have resources. Now, for the life of me, I can't remember why we expose these. We don't really need to, but we'll leave them as is for now. We're going to create 2 new variables, and those will be our refined metal resource, and this will be a float, and we're just going to move this into our resources folder. The next one we are going to create is our max refined metal resource, and we are going to again add that to our resources category here. Now, if we look at our function list, we have our set max resources. Let's go ahead and open that up. And just very briefly going over the logic, remember we have to set this at the start. And I actually totally skipped that step in my prep file. But we have to set what our default max is. That way we don't accidentally keep adding it in, which is why we subtract it out and then add it back in once we got the correct number. It is a bit confusing. If you don't remember the logic behind this, go check out our resource video from the earlier section. And remember, this is done by building. So step 1 in this part, or not really 1 because this is all step 1, so we're just going to shrink these down a bit, move it closer, and we are going to set our max resources for our refined metal. Drag that into there, and we'll set this to 1500 as well. And let's go over to our main part of our loop that we care about. This is where we actually set what our max is. So we're going to get our max metal, or max refined metals, and we are going to do a float plus float with 3 pins. This bottom one is the type of building, what it's adding in. So this is our resource buildings, which have larger storage capacity, so it's 500. And then we are going to get our refined metal, and we are going to subtract from it the max, plug that into there. And then we're going to get our default max resource and plug that into the second pin. Now we're going to take all of this and we're going to Control W it down here. And the only difference we're going to make is change this to 250 because these are our industrial buildings, which have some resource capacity, but not as much as our resource buildings. I'm just going to train these pins up by selecting everything on that top line and hitting Q. Looks like it's already lined up pretty nicely, actually. All right, so that takes us through step 1. We'll save and compile, or compile and save. We will leave this open because we'll come back here. In fact, I just want to make sure that I know where I'm going to put it. I'm going to start it down here. So the next step, step 2, is setting up our main UI. So let's go back to our blueprints folder. Our blueprints folder. I was right. And open our widgets. In our widgets, we have our main game UI HUD. I really hate my naming convention here. By the way, proper naming convention should be WBP for widget blueprint _ main game or main UI or something like that. Or W _ like we did for some of the other ones. But that's a different matter for a different day. So the first thing we need to do here is extend this out. But before we even do that, let's go back to our content viewer or content browser, content, if I can say that word correctly, and go to our textures folder, and we'll import our new icon. So there's our new icon. Let's go ahead and import it. There we go. It's our nice little cog. Go back to the UI now, and we have our resources box. I'm just going to collapse that down. Let's extend it out, and I'm going to copy this small spacer. Actually, sorry, I'm going to copy the icon, the small spacer, the text, and this final large spacer that's used to separate out the resources. And I'm going to Control W them. That didn't seem to work, so I'm just going to right-click, copy, select the parent, and then hit paste. There we go. And let's just rename our images a bit here. So this new image will be our refined metal icon, and let's change the image over. Send out brush, type in refined metal, and remember it's going to be 50 by 50 because we've now just stretched everything out. 50 by 50. There's our cog, and we now need to create a text. So this will be refined metal text. And we're going to be really, really lazy about this. We're just going to copy over stuff we know already works. So hit binding, create new binding. Let's rename this. And again, yes, I know I could hit F2, but using OBS, I tend to have issues with that, even though I've removed that as a hotkey from OBS, as get refined metal resource amount. And we're just going to drag this node some ways out that way. Let's go to our wood resource, and let's just copy everything that's in here. So Control C, go back to, we don't need get, why is that open? Go back to your get refined metal, paste that in, and I'm just going to line it up like this. I apparently need a lot more room than I thought. Also, I could probably make this a bit neater, but that's a different story for a different day. I'm going to unhook that pin using Control and left click, plug it into there, plug that into there. Oh, I see what I did wrong here. And put a reroute there, plug this into there, and finally what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to highlight everything minus that start node and just raise this up slightly. I also plug that into the wrong one, so I'm going to unpin that. I'm going to pin that there. It goes through the set local. Sorry about that. So plug that into the set wood local. I am emphasizing the fact that it does say wood right now intentionally. And again, I'm just going to line this up a bit nicer and neater before we go forward. And let me just unselect that first node. There we go. And that's actually fairly lined up. So I'm going to go to this first set wood local. I'm going to right click it, and we're going to promote to a local variable. I'm going to scroll down on my variables list, and I'm going to change this to refined metal local. So refined metal local. You'll notice it changes on all of them. So that's now refined metal. That one is too. That one is. We still have to do the same for our text. We'll take care of that in a second. Let's get rid of this wood resource off the player controller. From our player controller, we're going to get our refined metal. And we want to get our refined metal resource. Plug that into there. And then let's just move this over a tiny bit. Plug that into there. Right-click your wood text local, and again, create local variable. Scroll down a bit on your variable list. Right-click or F2 to rename it. And it's going to be refined metal text local. I totally spelled that wrong, so I'm not able to see my typing with a microphone there. So I'm going to try that again. Refined metal text local. Sorry about that. There we go. And let's just test this out, make sure it actually works. And if you remember, it should be 0 because we've put nothing in here, and I intentionally have nothing in there. We will put a test number in a little bit. So we hit play. There's our 0, 0, our new icon. Everything there is working fine. I have done on one of these, this is the wood resource, so you can add tooltips in so when you mouse over. But we'll talk about other ways of doing mouse overs that might be better and create new, easier to read pop-up widgets. So Control S, save everything. All right, so the next step of what we need to do is we need to start setting up our UI for the building itself. Now, the way we're going to do that is we're going to go over back to our blueprints folder into our widgets, and we have our building info HUD. Again, bad naming convention. And let's go over to our designer real quick. Let's just grab this because this is in the wrong spot. Let's drag this down here. We're actually going to move everything back to that spot in a second. Grab all of this and comment this out as training. Sorry, I need to be zoomed in because I totally was spelling training post wrong. Training post. So these are the functions all related to the training post. Place that up there. And what we need to do in here as our third step of setting up our, or second part of step 2, setting up our new interface to actually produce this resource, is we need to go into our widget switcher. Let's collapse that for a second. If you hear loud snoring in the background, that is just the dog napping away. Okay, so like we did before, the naming convention here is meant to make our life just a tiny bit easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new scroll box. So you go down to your panels, drag in your scroll box, and place it inside the widget switcher, which we have titled in this building specific window. We are going to name this one, and this is the part where the number is useful, 2 underscore factory. And in our factory, we are going to have 2 buttons, but at the end. Right now, we are going to have 1 button, and that is to produce our resources. So we want to grab a horizontal box. You want to drop it into our factory, and this will be our produce resource. I'm just going to put it as res anchor. Produce res anchor. And in here, we're going to have a button. And in the button, we're going to have some text. There we go. So we are just going to set this button to fill, just so it'll make our lives a tiny bit easier. And this will be our produce res button. We will then fill this text in as our produce res button text, and it will say produce refined metal. And we're going to change the font size just because that's massive. We're going to drop it down to 20. There we go. Now with that set, everything is pretty much good to go in this step. We just have a couple of little bits left. And that little bit we have left is we're going to, add a spacer underneath this. And we are going to give this button a little bit of functionality in this step. The next step will actually be adding in the full functionality. So let's grab that spacer, which comes out of our primitives list, or you can search at the top here. And we're just going to put it inside of our factory specific window. And I'm just going to open up the padding a bit because I don't want it to be padded on all sides. I just want to be padded on the bottom by 15 units. So you notice the box has gotten slightly bigger underneath. That dotted line is now further down. All right, let's go to our graph. And because I haven't done it this way, we're just going to do it this way. We're going to grab our produce resource button. I prefer doing it from the designer because I can actually see the button instead of having to hunt through the variable list. And we will do on clicked. So on clicked, there it goes. It adds it in for us. What we are going to do is, well, we're going to pause for just a second. We're going to go back to the player controller. And in the player controller, we're going to do a custom event. This custom event will be start resource production. There we go. Go back to your building HUD. Grab from your references your building reference. Get from your building reference your player controller. From your player controller, we are going to grab start. Sorry, my dog is being really loud. I'm getting distracted by that. Start resource production. And go ahead and plug that into there. We will be adding more things into this later on. So that takes us through, yes, you're getting the warning because there is nothing attached to this right now. So when we go into it, there's nothing here, thus the warning. Also, we haven't compiled this. That's part of the issue. There we go. Now the warning should go away. Now that we've done this, we are truly going into step 3. And step 3 of today's lesson is setting up the function for this start production inside our player controller. Now, I should note that we are going to do a check in here that can be a pure function. But if we use this, it will limit, if we make a pure function, it will limit the way we can do certain things. We're going to be limited in some of the design, and it'll be easier to explain as we actually get through this. So what we're going to do is in our event graph, we are going to start a timer. So drag off the execute pin here, set timer by function name. And every 10 seconds this function runs will produce, so this is going to be looping every 10 seconds, we will produce our new resource. So this will be produce refined metal. I'm going to copy that name, and I'm going to create a new function called produce refined metal. Now, the first step of this is that check. Do we have enough resources to produce it? Now, we've done similar checks before, but this one is, again, going to be a bit different because we're not passing through information related to unit building. So our other checks are, do we have enough resources to build this unit? Do we have enough resources to build this building? And the way those checks have worked before, if we take a quick look at them, let's see if we can find our building check, is we are getting the cost from either the unit trainer for the building new units. That's why we have that unit trainer somewhere up. There we go. Our RTS unit trainer up there, so we can get the information from there. Or we're getting it from the building, which we spawn in when we start our preview. So we check if we have resources when we click down. This gets from the preview ref, so we can't use our earlier pure functions. So good object-oriented design would have planned for this and have accounted for it, or we'll have to create a whole bunch of very similar functions. So holding down, so going back to what we're doing in this refined or produce refined metal, I'm just going to hold down B, click in to get my branch, plug my branch into there, and instead of actually making that pure function like I did previously, what we're going to do is we're drag back off of this, do an AND, because we need to check for both metal and wood. So the idea in this is that you have to burn wood to create heat. You have to take your ore resource and heat it up to a certain amount to get your refined metals. So we're going to get our wood resource, and let's say it's going to be 25 units of wood to every 100 units of metal. And we are going to do float is greater than or equal to 25. Ooh, that was not the number I wanted. There we go, 25. That's the first step. The second step is, do we have 100 ore resource? And again, these are just numbers I randomly picked. So again, is it greater than or equal to 100? The actual numbers I would use in a game would be, I would test them out for balancing. But right now, I'm just using dummy numbers to make sure this actually works. So after we've done that, what we're going to do is we're going to set our wood resource, and we are going to set our ore resource, and we are going to set our refined metal resource. There we go. And then we're going to return off of there. Make sure it's a return node and not return resources. Now, we aren't going to set these all to 0, don't worry. So the first one is we are going to set this to wood resource, get it, minus float 25, because it takes 25 units, as I mentioned. Plug that into there. And again, it can be any number you want. Just make sure the number here matches the number you use here. Otherwise, you're going to run into issues later on. We are going to get our ore resource. In fact, you actually might want to promote this to a local variable. That way, if you change one, you don't have to worry about changing the others. And I'm going to do that just to be on the safe side. And this will be wood cost local. And I don't like the fact that just kind of went up there. And I'm going to do the same for this one as ore cost local. Drag that down there. Compile. Make sure that says 100. It does. Make sure the other one says 25. It does. And let's plug that into there. Let's grab our ore cost local. And we are going to do a float minus float. Plug that into there. And for the final step, this one's the easiest of them. We're going to get our current refined metal resources. And we are going to do float plus float of just 1. We're adding 1 in. We could also use increment. So now that that's done, let's test this out. Let's make sure this works. Now remember, it's going to take 10 seconds. So it's going to be just me kind of rambling at you. Ooh, we skipped one major step. And I'm sorry about that. That should have been in step 2. Let's go back to our building info HUD. Let's go to the very top of it. And let's just move this down a bit. We are actually going to copy this. So Control W it. Change the index to 2. And we are going to attach this to factory. Now compile. Let's test this out. Open up your factory. There's our new button. Let's make sure it's not showing up anywhere else. Nope, we're good. It is actually switching between building types. And let's hit produced refined metal. So in approximately 10 seconds, we should see 1.0. Also, we should see this number decrease. In there, it decreased and that increased. There we go. So we know that's working. That is wonderful. However, there are a few issues. It's going to keep producing even when we don't have the resource amount. And I can't tell unless I look up here that we're currently producing resources. So there are a couple more steps. I didn't close that out. There are a couple more steps I want to take care of in this video. Right now what we're going to do instead is my original step 4, which is to add in our, let's go back to our player controller. In here, let's just move all of this down a bit. We are going to add in what happens if this is false. So if we don't have the resources, let's go back to our event graph. Let's scroll down to here. Let's grab, sorry, I was just thinking about something. I thought I might have to thought of a better way to do this than I have in my current notes. And I'm really tempted to use that instead. Yeah, actually, we'll do that. We'll do the custom event because this is better object-oriented design, and this will be stop resource production. And all we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this down here, plug that in, remove the timer, so set it to 0, remove the looping, and we're going to go back into our produce resource, or produce refined metals, and we are going to, off this false, call our stop produce, or stop resource production. Now later on we're going to have a step before this, but this is the sort of ultimate goal we need. So when we don't have enough of these resources, we'll stop production. Compile, save, go over to your building info, and in here what we're going to do is we're going to break this. We are going to grab all of this and just move it out of the way for a second, and we're going to put a flip-flop in. So remember, what a flip-flop does is every time you click the button, it switches between which of the events it calls. So the first time you press it, we are going to want to start production. I'm just going to put a reroute in there. Raise that up too. And then off the player controller, we're going to get our stop resource production. And when we press it again, we want that to happen. Okay, so now when we press the button, we at first will start producing resources, and then we will stop producing the resource. Yes, I am being anal retentive and trying to get this lineup to be a bit neater and nicer looking. All right, compile, save, Control S, save everything. Let's hit play real quick and make sure this works. Open our building up, hit produce refined metals, and after 10 seconds, it should produce 1. And it's going to be a little bit, unfortunately. The 10 seconds is a bit long. There it is. We're going to press it again, and we are going to wait another 10 seconds to make sure this doesn't accidentally create more resources. And I'm pretty sure it's been more than 10 seconds, and it hasn't created anything. So that is wonderful. That means the flip-flop is working. Now, we could also have put a break here to see which route it went down. So if you don't know how to do that, you right-click, add breakpoint, hit this, click there, step through, and there we go. We can hit resume, click it again, step through, and we can see that the flip-flop is actually working. Let's remove that breakpoint. Let's Control S, save everything. All right, so now that we've done that, what we are going to do are the last 2 steps for this, which is to check if there are room for resources, and then to set our visual cues up that a resource is being produced. So go back to your main game UI, go to your designer, and let's just collapse the resource thing down, and let's grab our funds box and duplicate it. This will be our storage box. Sorry, I hit caps lock at some point. Storage box. And we'll move it over in a moment. And we're going to align it to center. And there are actually better ways to align things to center than what I've previously done, but we'll take care of that again in a moment. This will be our storage text. And it's going to say insufficient storage. And then go back to your storage box. We'll move the position to -140 by -20, and we'll leave it there. The visibility is already set up for us, so that makes our lives a tiny bit easier. We will, however, create a new event. So let's go to our graph. Let's go to our event graph. And we have this trigger text. We're also going to have a new thing similar to that, a custom event, and this is going to be trigger storage text. And let's find our storage text. That's our fund text. Storage text. And we're going to set visibility. It's going to be visible. We are going to add in a delay of 2 seconds, just like we did above. Not 0.2, but 2.0. And we are going to just duplicate this over to save ourselves some time and set it to hidden. Now the way we're going to test this is, well, we actually have other steps to do before we test it, sorry. But we are going to test this. We're going to give ourselves 259 resources at the start there. So we've done that. Now we need to go to our player controller, and we need to go to our produce resources, which is already there. We're going to break that false pin. We're going to grab the reference to our main game UI, and we are going to do trigger text. This is our insufficient resources text. You actually could have done this a step earlier. Plug that into there. The next thing we need to do is to make sure we have enough room for this. So we're going to move this further along. We're going to actually move that even further along. We're going to break this by putting in another branch. If this branch is true, we'll produce the resource, which is, do we have room for these resources? So we want to get our refined metal resource. Now you can either do this as float plus 1 is less than or equal to, or you could do this as refined metal resource is less than. I like just having the extra step in because I know I'm adding 1 in, of actually adding our float in. And we want to know if we do produce this resource, so that's what this part is, that if we produce it, because it will be 1 greater than what we currently have, will this number be equal to or less than our max? Again, you can drop this out and just change this to be less than. If we do not have the room for this resource, what we are going to do is we are going to get our main game HUD again, or UI, and we're going to trigger storage text. And then we will trigger our stop resource production. So it comes up here and we stop our resource production. All fairly simple stuff. So let's go ahead and test this out and make sure that it actually works. And let's find our refined metal resource. Set this to 249 because our max is 250. If you want to know how I got the max, you go to into here. We only have 1 resource management building, which is our factory, and the max is 250 there. You can also hit play, start the game, and check this value if you want. So we should see 249 there. Good. Let's hit produce resource. Wait approximately 10 seconds, and then we should see that we'll get 250. Wait another 10 seconds, and we should get the error message. There's our 250, and soon we will get that error message. Now, clearly there's a bit of issue that you might see in terms of, oh, hello, why did we go over? What happened there? Well, this is why we test things. So this is where we debug stuff. We're going to go into here. We're going to go over here. 499. 499. 250. 250. Oh, I see the mistake I've made. Sorry about that. I made a slight mistake. Grab your refined metal pin. Unhook that. Unhook your max. And it's max minus, there you go, and do the same up here. Do the same up here. This will let me do this easily. I'd be a very happy person. Okay, now let's test this out again. Hit play. All right. Oh, need help if I had the debugger set to the right thing. I see the second mistake I made. So, it's not refined metal there. It is our default amount as well. There we go. Control W that up there. Sorry about these little mistakes. And let's just work out what the heck is going on, because the numbers are actually still wrong. All right, 170, 170. We're all at 170. Brilliant. Let's actually just skip that step for a second. There should be 250. There we go. We'll actually toss that back in, and you'll have to just remember that your max is a bit different. So let's go back to our factory. Sorry about those mistakes. Produce our refined metal. So in 10 seconds, we should get into our new one. Just going to switch this over. We have our breakpoint there still. Brilliant. So we hit our breakpoint. We continue on. Reproduce that. It's now 250. And now, when we hit the breakpoint again, it should decrease to the correct number. Or sorry, it should go down to the false branch. There we go. We hit resume. Insufficient resources. Brilliant. Okay. Sorry that took so long. Save everything. close out your standard macro, so we don't need that anymore. We actually never needed it. We just have to step through it, unfortunately. So the final thing that we need to do in today's video, step 6, is we need to set the visual cues our resources are being produced. So the first thing we need to do is go to our player controller, and we need to create a new variable. And this variable will be a simple Boolean that is producing resource. So all we're asking are is this currently producing a resource? Now this might be problematic if we have multiple factories, but we will tackle that in a later video. Go into your event graph, break this, and move this over here. And we are going to set this to true. So we are producing. Plug that in. And off the back of this one, we are going to do the same thing. So anytime this stop resources gets called, we're going to trigger this. We're no longer producing. Save it. This is just a step we need to make things work a tiny, tiny bit better. All right. So now that we've done that, what we need to do is we need to go to our building UI or HUD. Go to our we need to be in our event graph. Sorry, I was supposed to say go to your designer, but that's not true. And what we need to do is we need to get a reference to that button, which is our produce resource button, which for some reason I'm not seeing really. There it is. It is alphabetical order. I was just for some reason skipping the P and going straight from this Q into the D here, which is weird. We need to get it. We need to set color and opacity. Plug that into there. And then we need to duplicate this down here. Plug that one into there. Move this back a tiny bit. Put a nice little reroute in there. And plug that into there. And we're going to set this to a light grayish color. And we're going to set this to white. So now when we go in and we click this button, it changes out. We click it again, it changes back. However, it will not currently change color if we run out of room for storage. So we need to take care of that. And the way we are going to do that is, I hate to do this, but I couldn't find a more reasonable approach, is we're going to create an event tick. And this event tick, so right click event tick, or just type in tick by the way, is going to check our building reference. So we're going to get that. From that, we are going to get our player controller. And from there, we are going to do a check on our is producing resource. Now, to save ourselves some time, let's put the branch in first. Put our branch in, plug that into our tick. To save ourselves a bit of time, we're just going to go down here. We're going to select both of these. Actually, I'm going to be lazy and hit Q on those so they line up nicely. Now select all of these, and we're going to scroll to the top with them selected still, and Control W them up here. Probably could have grabbed the, I didn't have reroutes, but I'll put reroutes in this one. Make that pretty with some reroutes. There we go. And now when we hit our max, it should stop producing our resource. So let's test that out, make sure it works. Produce resource, it's grayed out. We've already tested if I click again. And in a couple of seconds, we should hit 250. Make sure to go back and put the pin back in so it isn't actually 250 as the max. And another few seconds, we should get the warning that we have insufficient storage. There we go. And the button is changed back in color and opacity. So everything is working. Go back to your player controller. Go back to your set resource max and plug this back in. Plug that into there. Compile. Control S, save everything. And that takes us through how we will produce our new special resource. If you have a farm, you can add animation events in that, will cause crops to come up over time. Now, you might also notice a slight issue in that the timers are a bit, they work, they're just a bit awkward. In that, well, when we do this goes every 10 seconds. And maybe it should have been 5 seconds, but whatever. You can, again, that's something you'd work with in your balancing at the end. It does this check every 10 seconds, and then it produces the resource. Well, maybe we don't want it to, maybe we want it to check and then to loop every 10 seconds producing this resource. There are ways to do that. It involves a little bit more timers and a little bit more nuance. We might tackle that, but it is a challenge for you if you want to work on it to find a way to do that. So that takes us through the 6 steps of what we need to do. Again, make sure you have set this back in because that should be there. Otherwise, you will run into issues later on. Or if you don't want to have any storage, you can set it to 0, but you do need, default storage, but you do need to set that as something or you will run into issues. All of this said, if you've enjoyed this lesson, go ahead and hit that like button down below and make sure that if you want to know when the next video is out, you hit the subscribe icon and the notification bell. That way, you're aware when that video is out. And as always, I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.